This morning we're going to look at the invisible fight, looking in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20. So if you have your phone or your Bible, here's the scripture. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm. Stand firm, therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. In addition to all, take up the shield of faith, with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And take up the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. With all prayer petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, and with this in view, be on the alert with all perseverance, and petition for all the saints, and pray on my behalf that utterance may be given to me in the opening of my mouth, to make known the boldness of the mystery of the gospel. And then verse 20, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that in proclaiming it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. May we pray? Father in heaven, we thank you for your grace, your love. We thank you for everything you've given us this morning as we look into what it takes to fight the good fight, what it takes to fight just battling evil. Lord, may we search ourselves to see if we're lacking it. But Lord, be with us as we continue through all we do. In the name we do pray. Amen. So my wife knows this. Some of you may not know. I like to watch wrestling. I'm the kid that loves it so much that when it holds a special place because it's a predetermined fight. But it holds a special place because as a kid, my dad would take me to the Mid-South Coliseum, and we will go on Monday nights to watch wrestling because it was like $5. That's before wrestling came to town. You had to pay $40 for a seat. But anywho, something about them hitting each other, because it looks invisible for them, but for us it looks like it's a real hit, right? And what happens is they have to snap their body and throw their body in such a way that that real punch to us looks fake. And so for us, we have to put on our armor as well, just as they have to prepare themselves with all the training they do. So our armor looks almost not the same, but kind of close. But we go into the scripture reading in verse 10 where we have a command of being strong and have courage. What Paul is starting us off here as we come to a close of chapter 6 is that he gives us a command to have courage. Not courage the cowardly dog, but courage as in to face something that's going to happen. It's a great reminder to us that throughout the word we see good things that happen, but then we also see terror, we also see death, and there's still courage in those things too. Think about when there's a funeral. There's the casket right here of the person that has passed away that we have to lay to rest. There's usually a charge given to the person from the person at the pulpit to say to the family, have courage, be strong in those days, because they're alone. Think about it as a spouse, the person they may have spent all their time with, now they're by themselves. When we also send missionaries off into the mission field, we pray for them to also have courage, because at times they can get discouraged by what's going on. Just recently, I don't think if you may have heard, there were some missionaries that were killed in a foreign country. We have to pray for the families for that very reason, to have courage that they were doing the Lord's will, but have courage to continue on, even though despite having a loved one missing. So Paul's doing the same thing here as we read. We are charged with this command to be ready for battles because we can't do it by ourselves. Because first, our connection is with the Lord. We need to be strong with Him. If we're strong with Him, we're on the same accord of the Lord. And what keeps us from being strong is when we're weak. Those moments that we are failing, because it's in our weaknesses that's when we sin. But when we're strong, it keeps us from sinning. Think about the last time you tried to do something by yourself. You weren't as strong as you needed to be to help yourself get out of whatever situation it may have been. Um, think about a weightlifter. When they have those massive barbells on each side, unless they have some type of juice that can help them pull that barbell up, they're like me. I'm going to need help. I'm going to call on Ben Dowden to come help me. Thank you, brother. I'm going to call on him to come help me get that weight up because Lord knows I can only get to about 115 pounds because I've kind of stopped lifting weights a long time ago. But anywho, we need someone to help us. Just like in our faith, we need someone to help us to fight those battles. We first need the Lord to help us, but we also need a brother or a sister to come alongside in those battles, in those times that we're maybe in the hospital that we feel discouraged. Recently, myself, and another coach, I've learned to coach blast ball. Has anyone ever heard of blast ball before? Blast ball is that introduction to baseball 101. And I have ages 3, 4, and maybe some in the 5-year-old range. And those kids, it's fun to coach those kids because we're trying to encourage them to hit the ball a certain way or catch the ball a certain way. So we need to help them alone. I can't have them just do it by themselves because if I do, they'll hit the ball and chase the ball rather than go to first base. It's an experience for me to see even my daughter so happy to hit a ball, but she wants to catch the ball. So I have to give her courage and help train her to show her, along with the other 6 or 7 kids that I have, of how to play baseball for the first time. But notice that when we try to do things on our own, we end up either injuring ourselves, hurting others, because, again, we can't do it on our own. We can't do it without the Lord. In Psalm 105:4, it says that we should seek the Lord and His strength to seek His face continually. When we're seeking the Lord, we're saying, Lord, I need you. Lord, I need you. Every hour I need you. We just seek His face to guide us to that next point. Because here's the reality. God doesn't play hide and seek. We play hide and seek. To seek His face means that we are going to that we see His holy and favorable presence. Give me 1 second. I'm going to move this mic. Verse 11 says that we should put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. So basically, we're getting ready for some type of warfare is what Paul is trying to describe. And how we should prepare ourselves, Paul says that we should put on that full armor. So, before someone goes to battle, they have to put on a protective covering. Before a police officer goes to work, they have to put on their vest. That protective covering. Back in the day, I worked for the state park, and you'd be surprised that with rangers who are technically police officers, they still put on a vest because they never know what they're going out for. So before we go out, we need to, before Paul says we go out, we need to put on our protective covering. And the reason behind it, he says why, is so that we will be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. So Paul, in this warfare, we don't need pure strength. What we need the Lord for this, right? Who else can guide us in the proper way of battle? God can. But notice that what he says, the battle is with the devil. Basically, we know the devil is a deceiver. He's a tricker. He's a liar. So we need God to get us through those things to battle him. It is Satan that brings us the warfare. He brings us the temptations, the desires of the world, the things that God does not want us to have. So we're supposed to put on that full armor to be ready for the devil, for what he puts in front of us. But notice that Paul's directive is not to tell us to wait for someone. He's not saying, Ed, wait for Jack Jim to put on his armor. Paul is telling us to be ready, for us to put on that armor, for us to be ready for that battle. So Paul could have said it best as this, and this is what I have. To those that hear me speak, or those right now as we read this word, he's basically saying, get your armor on, get your armor ready. Because if we stall, that's when we leave ourselves open for anything to get us. So when we talk about the full armor of God, we're talking about a protective coating from head to toe. But we also know this full armor comes from the Lord himself. But we should also know that this armor is not to be something heavy. I see it as something that brings us comfort. If you look back at Job in chapter 1, verses 6 through 12, we saw that the devil says that he was looking to and fro, which means Satan is looking for someone to seek and devour, right? That should be an alert for all of us, a good reminder to always be on alert for what's coming. Because when we fall into sin, sometimes we don't notice it just then, but by the time we notice it, it's a little too late for us to get out of it. And when we try to get out of it, we're trying ourselves to get out without leaning on the Lord to help us get out. Or when we go to the beach, every beach has a flag, right? Different colors means different things. Different warnings, whether it's good waves, bad waves, stay out of the water. If we ignore those flags, especially on those dangerous waves, we're going to put ourselves in a situation that's going to be hard for us to get out. It's going to cause a lifeguard to come out to come get us and put themselves in danger. So we have to be on alert. But Paul is reminding us in verse 11 to a call to be ready, because the armor of God is our protection. It is what will keep us encounter the devil and will keep us firmly planted with the Lord. And then we see that there's the invisible fight in verse 12. Because it says that for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. So if you read in verse 12, if you have an ESV Bible, it says that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. Both have the same meaning. If a struggle and a wrestle is basically you're fighting against something. It may seem that those words from Paul, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, for those who are kind of reading it really fast, or if you read it just saying, "Oh, we're fighting against flesh and blood," you're thinking that we're fighting against one another. I'm fighting against my brother and my sister. But Paul doesn't say that, does he? One writer said that the enemies are not human flesh and blood, although, of course, the spiritual powers of evil may use human instruments. So what is implied in the first few words is that Paul is saying that we don't face a physical army, however, it's a spiritual army that we're facing. And that army has rulers, powers, forces of darkness, spiritual forces of wickedness. All those will be a demonic nature against not only God, but also against his people. So when we look at those rulers, we're looking at those who are looking to get rank. Those powers are those who are looking to suggest their way of authority. The forces of darkness are those who are revolting against the Creator. Spiritual forces of wickedness, as Curtis Vaughan said, depicts them as an army of wicked spirits inhabiting, or at least bringing their combat to the heavenly sphere. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says that the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they may not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So what Paul's trying to say is that those gods that he's referring to are those gods of Satan. Because Paul would not share the characteristics of a holy and righteous God with a man who wants to deceive people. Because we can all agree that God is the only God of this age and the next age. But then Paul tells us that we need to embrace this armor that we have. Therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm. So verse 10, we're told to stand strong. Verse 11, we're told to stand firm. Both are encouragements that we get to in 13. But he brings us to but he says the word therefore, which is going to bring us back to 12. He's saying, therefore, basically, be ready for the enemy. The difference between when we're saying putting on and taking up is the context of the meaning. Because you tell me I need to put on something, I'm going to take it off. You tell me to put on a jacket, not in this wonderful July heat. No, it's already in June heat. But if it's the winter, you're going to tell me I need to put on my jacket to keep from being cold. But once I get into my house or my car, I'm going to take it off. So I'm already in the warmness of what's going on. But Paul is telling us to take up. Taking up means we're going to embrace it. We're going to hold on to it. This is our call to get ready for battle. Because just as the evil day comes, we will have that full armor of God, or the whole armor of God, as the ESV says it. 2 Thessalonians 3:3 says that, but the Lord is faithful, and he will strengthen and protect you from the evil one. But if we look into our text this morning, this is the second time that we see the word stand firm. Because when we stand firm, we're saying we're going to fight at all costs. We're not going to move because the devil tells us to move. We're going to stand firm and actually battle with him. If it's standing or if I'm on my knees, we're going to stand firm for what is coming for us. To stand firm means we're going to triumph. To stand firm means we're going to, again, stand our ground against Satan and his army, to resist the evil day, as the word says. Standing firm means we're standing firm on the word of God to get us through it. Standing firm means we're going to stand in our faith, as 1 Peter 5:8-9 says, that we are to be sober spirit, to be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. But verse 9 says, but resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same experience of suffering are being accomplished by your brethren who are in the world. So as long as we're standing firm, we're going to oppose those schemes of the devil. Then these next four verses, 14-17, we have God's provided armor. Not the armor that we can make up with, an Amazon box as we were kids trying to be soldiers or whatever it is. This is God's provided armor. 14-17 says that we should stand firm, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, in addition to taking up the shield of faith, with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. So Paul is painting a beautiful picture of what the armor of God will look like. Each part has its own place of protecting us. But notice again, we're being told to stand firm. We must stand on watch is what Paul is calling us to do. Paul is calling us to to turn our attention to a direct attention to a cause. Because it's when we stand firm is when we stand watch. I don't know how many are. Well, we live in the South. We have lots of hunters, right? When you have a flashlight looking for that deer, thank you. You see, I am not a hunter. I am not a hunter. This is why I watch wrestling. So, if you do the illegal way of trying to spook the deer, just kidding. But you know that you need to see where you're going in the dark sometimes if you're not hunting. You got me. Or when you're playing hide and seek, you want to like scare your friend with a flashlight, kind of get them frozen. You have to see where they are, basically. We need to have that burning light, or we need to have God's burning lamp at the same time when we are standing watch for what's coming for us. Joseph XL said this, that thy watch candle go not out in any part of the darkness of this darksome time, lest thy enemy comes upon thee in that hour. If we have that lamp on, we are able to see what's coming for us. And then Paul tells us this special order that each part plays in protecting us against the schemes of the devil. The girded loins of truth means we're accepting the Bible and choosing to follow it with all integrity. So carry the word with sincerity. That breastplate of righteousness means that we are going to not embrace or feed into sin. We are striving to be just like Christ. We should not neglect the righteousness, and doing so leaves us again open to be wounded when we don't have that breastplate. The shod of feet. As many commentaries I found, because this was one I could not figure out, but basically this is your foot gear because you need something to protect your feet when you're going to battle, right? That means we're going to bind the word under our feet to be ready to share the gospel at any time. Psalm 29:11 says that the Lord will give strength to his people, and the Lord will bless his people with peace. But then we have that shield of faith. That shield of faith is behind that shield, we are being protected for what's coming at us. Think about it's the image we've seen many times on Facebook or whatever you look at. It's that there's a child and there's a parent with a shield protecting their child from the flaming arrows of what's coming at them, whether it's the worldly views or Satan himself. That is the shield of faith. The helmet of salvation, when we receive the helmet of salvation, we need to accept it, take it, and welcome it. And this is not just for current believers, but this is also for those new believers. And then the sword of the Spirit is basically God's own word. The word that we carry around, whether it's on our phone, the book in our house, the book in our car, the Gideon's Bible you find in the hotel, that is God's own word. That sword lays bare to separating false information to showing you what the truth is in front of you. Hebrews 4:12 says that the word of the Lord is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, and piercing as far as the division of soul and spirit, of both joint and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and the intentions of the heart. And then Paul's last thing he tells us to be in prayer. How sweet prayer is. Every pastor will say it. It is our number one connection to the Lord. It is how, well, he already knows what we want to say. He just wants to hear from us. How sweet of a time is it just to stop what you're doing and say, Lord, here I am. Use me. Show me. Verse 17 says that with all prayer petition, pray at all times in the Spirit. And with this in view, be alert with all perseverance and petition for all saints, for all the saints. and pray on my behalf, that utterance may be given in the opening of my mouth to make known with boldness, with boldness, the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that proclaiming it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. Paul's getting ready to close out chapter 6. He's getting ready to close out the book of Ephesians. But he's telling the church to pray at all times, to lobby in prayer as well. Paul is telling our prayers need to be a sincere request. And those prayers are not only are for those saints, for himself. Because Paul right now is still in prison as he is writing this. Paul wants the gospel to be known and to be bold. Paul sought courage from prayer to proclaim the gospel to even those in prison. Because what else could Paul do? He was already in prison. They couldn't do anything else to him besides kill him. Paul wanted even the gospel in the prison to be heard. But notice that what Paul said. He said that in verse, I got to find it real fast. Verse 20, he says, I'm an ambassador in chains. Can you imagine yourself in chains still saying, Lord, use me? What concerns Paul most is not that his wrist may be unchained, but that his mouth will be open in testimony. Not that he will be set free, but that the gospel may spread freely without hindrance. Paul's words to the Ephesian church are the same today for all of us. To be on alert for spiritual warfare. It can be against yourself. It can be against our family. It can be against our church. We should always be on alert, always have on our spiritual armor. Paul tells us to be strong, to stand firm, and to put on our armor. And to lastly, to pray. Let us pray.